The month of July alone brought to light a harsh reality. The amount of money that was flowing into the coffers rose, but the amount of money that was leaving the coffers climbed even more quickly. The result was a deficit of $290 billion, and the promise that tariffs will be eliminated was not supported by the deficit due to the circumstances of this scenario. As to why this took place, it is not the language of numbers that holds the answer. Rather, it is the balance of numbers they contain. Let's get the official numbers straightened out. Initially, there was a deficit of $291 billion in a single month, July, according to the data. It is true that this is a significant number, but what is more significant than the number is this. In spite of the fact that tariffs saw an increase, which resulted in an increase in revenue, this deficit was nonetheless incurred. This indicates that there was a rise in the amount of money brought in. Spending, on the other hand, was very robust, and the money that was allocated to interest is now playing a major role in the overall flow of the budget. Explanations that are very technical are not required in this situation. A household budget is comparable to the budget, which includes the amount of money you earn, the amount of money you spend, and the amount of interest you pay on your loans. The rationale remains the same, despite the fact that the state is larger in scale and contains more elements. Taxes and tariffs imposed on imports are a source of revenue for the Treasury. Nevertheless, this contribution will not be sufficient to cover the deficit if spending is increasing at a faster rate, particularly if interest rates on debt are increasing. This is precisely what took place throughout the month of July. Take it one step at a time, shall we? What does it mean to have a monthly deficit? What factors led to such a high number being recorded in just 1 month? What was the reason that tariff revenues did not come to the rescue? How did interest come to be such a deciding factor? Last but not least, how would this vision be represented in the pockets of residents' prices and the world of business? In every section, we shall communicate effectively, because this is not just a number. We will be asking you questions as we progress through the process. It is an issue that has an impact on day-to-day existence. It is imperative that you remember to subscribe and enable notifications. The assistance that you provide is quite valuable, as it enables us to continue explaining these seemingly complicated concepts in a language that is easily understood by everyone. The fact that there was a deficit of $291 billion in July indicates that the amount of money that was brought in during that month exceeded the amount that was spent. Possibly you're wondering why this number is so high. As a result of the fact that certain things naturally change throughout the summer months, the tax calendar and the distribution of allocations, times during which particular payments are concentrated. Variations throughout the month are caused by several causes. However, the trend is the most important thing to consider here. Over the course of several months, there has been friction. While there's an increase in revenue, there's a more rapid increase in spending. Additionally, we are aware that import taxes and tariffs had a considerable increase in the month of July, which resulted in a substantial contribution to the Treasury. The fact that the deficit increased despite this indicates that spending is being increased at a faster rate. In particular, the amount of money that is going toward interest has increased when the size of the debt is considerable. Even a slight increase in the interest rate can greatly increase the monthly burden, so it is important to keep this in mind. To summarize the events that transpired in the month of July, tariffs were a source of support. However, interest and other items climbed much more rapidly. Exactly why is there such a lot of talk about tariffs? Considering that these taxes on imports are being discussed in political debates as a source of revenue that can be used to self-finance, let's collect additional taxes on items that are imported. By doing so, we are able to safeguard domestic manufacturers while enriching the Treasury. On paper, it appears to be enticing. Nevertheless, when put into practice, there are two issues that arise. To begin, it is possible that this revenue will continue to be quite low in comparison to everything else. Secondly, when this tax is passed on to prices, it increases pressure on the consumer side, which results in indirect impacts that are returned to the budget through various channels. In July, more money was made via tariffs. This is something that cannot be denied, yet the budget is comprised of several other expenditures, including healthcare, pensions, defense, education, infrastructure, disaster response, social programs, and transfers to states. The list is quite lengthy. Not only that, but there is also interest that is accrued on the debt. The concept of scale comes into play at this point. An increase in tariffs is currently taking place. Nevertheless, what is the overall expenditure? In the event that overall spending expands at a considerably higher rate, the raise that is brought about by tariff income will be reduced into a significant deficit. At home, a straightforward comparison is sufficient. In this scenario, you would be pleased if a new item with a value of 100 units was added to your income each month. Nevertheless, if your rent were to increase by 200 units every single month, the outcome might still be unfavorable. The same should be said for the budget of the state. Despite the fact that tariffs contribute to the expansion of the budget, the deficit worsens when interest and certain required expenses expand at a rate that is twice as fast as the increase in revenue. Considering that the question is understandable, wouldn't it be preferable to hike tariffs even further? Because there is a possibility that imports will decrease. The answer is not entirely apparent. Tax revenue decreases in tandem with a decrease in imports. Additionally, a portion of the costs are represented in the pricing, which consequently results in the buyer purchasing the goods at a higher price. In the event that demand decreases, the tax base will also decrease. It is important to note that high rates do not necessarily result in huge revenues. In politics, the most important question is how to strike a balance between competing interests. The most eye-catching fact of the most recent time period is the rise in the financial burden of interest expenses. Over the course of the previous years, the government borrowed money in order to cover both its expenditures and its revenue shortages. Due to the maturation of the loan, the debt stock has increased. For new borrowing, the interest rate that is in effect at the time is used. For the third time, there is a progressive repricing that occurs when interest rates remain high for an extended length of time. This indicates that a greater amount of interest is paid out of the budget on a monthly basis. It is not necessary to become mired down in the specifics of the technical aspects. It would be adequate to mention that the costs associated with interest are increasing. If the rate of this growth is greater than the rate at which tariff revenues are increasing, then the impact of the tariff will be insignificant. What we saw in July was a picture that was exactly like this. Let's say that interest rates go down. Certainly, this would bring about a sense of relief. On the other hand, due to the high amount of debt, the impact of the decrease on the budget would be spread out over a longer period of time. Simply said, there is no button that can perform miracles. The reduction in interest rates that took place today will not instantly make things easier tomorrow morning. The term structure, previous borrowing, and market demand are all aspects that play a role in this situation. And further essential aspect is the rate of expansion. When the economy is expanding at a quick rate, revenues become more vigorous, and when growth slows down, tax collections strengthen. The rate at which revenue is growing is slowing down. It is imperative that this fact not be overlooked. According to the numbers for the month of July, tariffs increased. How come that wasn't sufficient? Mainly due to the fact that other channels were unable to contribute at the same rate. Additionally, there are automatic rises on the spending side, and there are also increases in population prices and healthcare costs. Certain things expand at their own pace, independent of the pace of the economy, and they follow their own trends. At this juncture, the following inquiry comes to mind. Would increasing taxes in general be a solution on paper? The answer is yes. Yet, while the economy is slowing down, tax hikes might further dampen demand. In addition, raising taxes is a choice that is fraught with political difficulty. Because of this, the debate typically centers on three topics: the discipline of spending, the tax base, and the policy toward foreign trade. None of these things will create miracles on their own. They each have their own set of advantages and disadvantages. These advantages and disadvantages are weighed against one another before a decision is reached. For the majority of people, the concept of budget deficits appears to be far off. There is a prevalent belief that because the government is so large, it will figure out a solution to the problem. On the other hand, that is not how it operates. When the government borrows money at higher interest rates, it establishes a standard in the financial markets. This benchmark is used to benchmark a wide range of financial products and services, including credit card interest, vehicle loans, mortgages, and commercial loans. Maintaining high interest rates results in an increase in the expenses of financing for those in the middle class. It is a hardship that is experienced firsthand. Price is the second area to consider. A rise in tariffs results in an increase in the price of things that are imported. The prices have increased to reflect a portion of this increase. This is something that can be seen in a variety of fields, including the automotive business, the white goods industry, the electronics sector, and even certain culinary products. All of the categories are not the same in this regard. There are a number of factors that come into play, including competitiveness, exchange rates, and logistics. In spite of this, it is abundantly obvious that tariffs impose an indirect burden on consumers through their budgets. Nevertheless, domestic producers are protected from the impact of tariffs. Naturally, there are those industries that let out a sigh of relief if, on the other hand, inputs like intermediate goods and machinery grow more expensive at the same time, then manufacturing costs will also increase. At this moment, there is a possibility that domestic product prices will also go up. To phrase it another way, the chain is complicated. The third area is the strategy that the business sector has in place. When there is an increase in uncertainty, investments are delayed. Questions include, will there be a decrease in interest rates? Will there be a rise in tariffs? Are there going to be taxes? The intended impact on businesses has been delayed. Investments have an impact on the rate of growth. It is because of this that budget revenues are impacted. It is necessary to have predictability in order to avoid a vicious loop. Over the past few weeks, there has been a heated discussion on social media regarding cash flow and tariffs. Statements that are as simple as a single syllable and simple pictures have circulated swiftly, and short movies feature two extreme statements. Tariffs are flowing. Either the deficit is decreasing or the funds in the coffers are zero. We cannot rely solely on tariffs. Both of these are, in fact, lacking something. The reason for this is that the budget does not consist of a single channel system. Despite the fact that tariffs do make a contribution, they are not sufficient to address the imbalance. This concludes the summary. It is more beneficial to place an emphasis on equilibrium rather than emotion in this situation. From the point of view of the spectator, a single statement may appear to be enticing, but from the point of view of the person making the decision, a single sentence may be considered dangerous. In place of a single line, the objective of this film is to provide a straightforward framework for the question of whether or not revenue channels are growing. Is there a marked slowdown in the rate of spending? Is there a reduction in the burden of interest? Let us not create an opinion without first considering these three questions together: the discipline of spending, the expansion of the revenue base, and the modifications to tariffs and standards in accordance with international commerce. The three headings are presented here in their entirety. Oh, if only things were that simple. Every one of them comes with its own price tag, time constraints, and political constraints. The discipline of expenditures might be useful in the near run, but the question of where to make cuts is controversial. In order to touch mandatory goods, there must be widespread social consensus. Over the course of the medium term, reforms that aim to boost efficiency will produce results. There is no easy solution, such as having a tax base, cutting taxes today, and relaxing taxes tomorrow. The objective here is not to raise the rate. Rather, it is to broaden the base by examining exemptions, simplifying the process, and minimizing the gap between the official and informal economies. These kinds of actions might be more politically acceptable, but the effects of them will be felt over a period of several years. Trade tariffs have the dual purpose of safeguarding particular industries and generating income, however. They have the effect of lowering imports, driving up prices, and increasing the cost of certain production lines when they are excessive. The provision of targeted protection through the implementation of regulations and standards, the reduction of ambiguity, and the opening of the entrance for investors is an alternate strategy. This strategy has the potential to reduce the risk premium as well. When there is a reduction in the risk premium, the Treasury is able to borrow money at more favorable interest rates. Indirectly, this has an effect on the deficit. What is the most appropriate strategy? There is not a single answer that is suitable. Tariffs alone will not be enough to solve the big deficit without a reduction in the interest burden and control over the rate of spending rises, according to the data from July. Balance is crucial, but the data is telling us that this is not the case. It will be challenging to achieve sustainable progress. In the event that interest rates are steadily decreased and this fall persists for a number of quarters, the cost of debt rollover will decrease. The monthly interest payments become less frequent. The Treasury now has some breathing room as a result of this. In spite of this, the process takes some time. It is possible that revenue will increase for a period of time in the short term if tariffs are increased further. On the other hand, if the volume of imports decreases, revenue will decrease once more at some point. In addition, the pressure that is represented in pricing will cause demand to decrease faster. A smaller tax base could result from this. If the rate of spending growth is permanently slowed down, there will be a significant improvement in the deficit in quite short order. However, this comes at a cost, both in terms of politics and society. When all three levers are working together in harmony, the goal is to achieve the healthiest conclusion possible. There needs to be a consensus on where to cut in short. There may be volatility in the demand for Treasury bond auctions. Increases in yield volatility are possible. It is possible that highly indebted industries, particularly those that rely heavily on capital, would experience increased pressure as a result of their heightened sensitivity to interest rates. It is possible that credit rules in the banking industry may continue to be stringent for some time. It is possible that corporations that have a low debt level and a primary focus on the domestic market will be somewhat more resilient in the stock market. I am not providing investment advice here. The interpretation of the picture is straightforward.